So hi everyone, I'm Chetan. I'm a senior lecturer in Faculty of IT at Monash in Clayton. So I came, it was quite a bit of a drive for me coming from Ferntree Gully. Right, so a little bit about myself. So the whole talk is about, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, overall research that I do in requirements, and a specific piece of work that we've done recently in collaboration with industry on generating test scenarios from requirements using RAG. I'll give a bit of an introduction and so on. So I'm Indian, I look very Indian. So yeah, so I was born and raised in India, north of India. I studied my undergrad in computer science, north of India, and then worked in the industry for a couple of years in Delhi. And then I moved to Germany to study my master's in software engineering. And then in parallel to my master's, I've worked almost the whole entire time at Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer is a chain of research institutes in Germany, most widely known for inventing MP3 format. So I worked there for more than 2 years. Okay, so sorry, people in the room. So if you share, just put it on here. So then I moved to industry as a product owner / software engineer, working for a company in Germany. And then one day I received an email from the world's best professor in software engineering asking if I would like to do a PhD with him. And then usually you don't say no to these kind of things. So I moved to Germany. Moved to Luxembourg. So those of you who don't know Luxembourg, it's a tiny landlocked country between Germany, France, and Belgium. So I lived in Luxembourg. I studied my PhD in Luxembourg, worked as a postdoc for 1 year before moving to probably the coolest job I could have had. So I moved to space domain. So I worked very closely with the European Space Agency and SpaceX, working on different projects with SES satellite, which is one of the largest satellite companies in the world. Despite the fact that Luxembourg is tiny, it is having these amazing space programs. And then the best time possible, February 2020, I moved to Australia. Yeah, it was like I entered Australia and they shut the doors. So I was working at another university as an academic director for coursework research. There are several issues around bringing Australian domestic students into research, encouraging them to do research. So that was part of my job, encouraging them and building pipelines of PhD students for domestic students and so on. Before I moved to Monash at the beginning of last year. And there I work as a software senior lecturer in software engineering. All right, and just another thing, I'm also an appointed member of International Requirements Engineering Board, so I'll talk about my research later, but I primarily work in requirements engineering, and I'm the only appointed member from Australia, Oceania, to the International Requirements Engineering Board. Right, so a little bit about requirements engineering research. How many of you have seen this picture before? Yeah.
Many times in the
Online, have anyone seen this picture before?
Not this one exactly, but something similar.
Okay, yep. So I guess I don't have to tell you the importance of requirements or doing your requirements well or specifying something that makes sense. So the overall motivation is that requirements documents are lengthy. They're specified in natural language by several authors, especially in domains that are safety critical. So if you go in healthcare domain or satellite domain where I work, the requirements, a normal requirements document looks like 500-page document. And that's for each project. And it's very waterfall model where they develop requirements for 6 months and then would start anything to do with the project because the requirements are the basis of the contracts. So, but there are several issues like the requirements are prone to ambiguity, incompleteness, consistency issues, correctness, issues and so on. And they're constantly changing because people change their mind. And probably that's why somebody came up with Agile. And you tell me, you work in industry, how well does Agile really work? And the requirements defects, statistically 50 to 70% defects are introduced using requirement phases, and they're super costly to fix, right, as they trickle down onto the later phases. So this is an overall picture of requirements engineering. So I work in all the 4 phases, so requirement specification, elicitation, analysis, and validation, and it's an iterative process, so it's not in a sequence. And there's another slide that shows like the kind of work we are doing in requirements in general. But this is my past research that I did in Luxembourg before moving to Australia. So I built a framework that we eventually sold for, so almost like a tool suite for part of my PhD for requirements quality assurance. We sold it for around 800,000 euros, which is roughly $1.5 million to 2 different companies in Canada and Germany. Of course, I didn't see even a single penny of it because unlike Australia, Europe, you are an employee of the university when you do your PhD. So you're not a student, so you're an employee, so all the IP from your research belongs to the universities. Anyhow, I'm happy it was used by someone, or it is being used by someone. So it's currently all this work is being marketed by one company, and then in general also there are 2 or 3 different companies that are using it even today, all this piece of work. So an example is, the first one is requirement writing best practices. So if you have a requirement like the status of the flight shall be periodically sent, it's passive voice, you don't know who's sending this status and to whom and so on. And periodically is what is periodically? Is it 1 millisecond or is it 10 seconds or 1 hour and so on? So what we did was build an NLP, so NLP-based natural language processing-based tool that would help comply analysts to certain templates. So this is one of the templates that is part of the best practices for writing requirements, like you have any condition, name of the system shall process object and any additional details about the object. So you can rewrite the same requirement as, after every 2 minutes, the navigator system shall send the flight coordinates to the nearest control station. And the tool that we had developed, or in general, the approach that we had developed, guides the people when they're not complying to the templates. This is not rendering properly, but anyhow, so the next one was glossary terms extraction and clustering. So when you're building requirements, you have to have consistent vocabulary. People don't focus too much on it, especially in geographically distributed development. For example, we had several cases where we were writing requirements in Luxembourg, but somebody was developing it in Israel. It was very important that we had consistent vocabulary when talking about certain systems. So for example, after every 2 minutes, the navigator system shall send the flight coordinates to the nearest control station. And after receiving the coordinates of the aircraft, the ground station shall send a confirmation to the aircraft. So this approach, also NLP-based, would cluster similar terms together and also tell you terminological inconsistencies. Like it will tell you that control station and ground station probably mean the same thing. And coordinates of the aircrafts or flight coordinates also mean the same thing probably. So you need to fix your vocabulary before you move forward. The next is the most important part, is change impact analysis. So imagine having a 500-page document, and if you change requirement on 1 page, what other requirements need to be changed to make it consistent? So that's also an NLP-based tool or approach that, for example, here, if you change the period from after every 2 minutes to after every 30 seconds, it will tell you that the requirement number 3 will be impacted, but not requirement number 2 with this. And it gives you a list of requirements in decreasing order of probability of them being impacted. And the next one is building domain models from requirements automatically. So we also have worked on several other models for like building UML. I don't know if you know UML class diagrams and so on, or other UML models. Yeah, so automatically building these models from requirements, human class diagrams, domain models, sequence diagrams, and so on.
So then basically what you're saying is you standardize the way you frame your requirements.
Yep.
In a particular structure, basically. And then you go to the next level.
Exactly. So we go from requirements to design. So just to give you a small example, so I'm teaching Introduction to Software Engineering. You were there. To first year undergrad students now. So we teach them the software development lifecycle. They develop a system throughout the semester. In the last week, what we do is we tell them, take your requirements, go to ChatGPT and try to generate the entire system in 2 hours, what you have been doing for 12 weeks. And believe me, in the last 2 hours, they were able to develop everything from requirements, the entire working prototype using ChatGPT, just because they went from requirements to class diagrams and sequence diagrams, generated that models and corrected them. So these are never perfect, right? So they went, did some iterations, and then we took that as an input to generate code, and then iterated a little bit more on with GPT models to get a working prototype. Now, these are not perfect, right? These are not industry scale that you can put in production code, but for student level projects, it works pretty well. All right, okay. So the current research in general that I or my group, we are working on, so you'll see some pictures with my PhD students. So we built a requirements engineering framework for human-centered AI systems development. So when you're building AI systems or any systems that have AI components, so we built a framework. So it's almost like a checklist of things that you need to take care when you're building and you're doing your requirements for AI-based systems. And we worked with 3 different companies in Victoria for developing this framework, and it was very useful for them. So most of these people are like machine learning or data scientists who have early stage startups, only know how to write machine learning code or so on, but don't consider who are you selling this to and so on. So making this work for them, actually, like this is going to be a software system that needs to be used by people. So that was Claude. She recently finished and was immediately hired by federal government based on her PhD work. That's Yutan. He's another one of my PhD students. He's working on an ethics of generative AI in healthcare domain. So he belongs to a pretty billion-dollar family in China. Has a huge healthcare setup in China, and he wanted to do PhD with me. And we are building a framework of how to work towards ethics when you're building healthcare apps and so on, so digital health apps with him. Owen, he's using virtual reality for requirements elicitation. So the usability testing and elicitation part is trying to use virtual reality to see how can we improve the experience. And then that's not for all kinds of systems, that's for specific types of systems like automotive systems and so on. But we are trying to use virtual reality in that. That's Ben. He's looking into emotion recognition in requirements engineering workshops, specifications, and usability testing. So if you're sitting in this meeting room discussing our product, so he has built a platform that will not just give a summary, which also other AI models do. It will, all based on the videos, it will annotate them based on our emotions. So if I was upset at something, like if we were discussing like a particular feature, it will annotate it with emotions, and it's pretty accurate in terms of emotion recognition, and give suggestions for improving those parts of features and so on. And he's also looking at automatically generating requirement specifications from team meetings.
I mean, is there an app or is there a...
So eventually that's a piece of research for us. So like we are not in the business of building apps or whatever.
But many husbands would need that to judge their wife's emotions. What are they
Yeah.
going through?
No
So
comment.
here you have created a framework, and these people have used that framework.
Which one?
Like all your research.
No, so this is all separate individual research pieces. Yeah.
How can we apply? Sorry.
Yes, sir.
How can we apply this for any startups who have got less than few $1,000s, and they're trying to build some $1 billion products. We don't have that much time to go through all these phases.
Yeah, so it depends, right? Like whatever works for you. So not all these things are for every companies, right? So what we try to do, for example, Owen's work is pretty also virtual reality work. It was very difficult for us to find any industry partner in Australia. And then eventually we are working with Chinese government and try working with Chinese government on a project. So we are working with Chinese government on this project, and they're pretty happy to collaborate with us. They're pretty open in collaborating with us. So we have regular meetings with them and so on using the Owen's research.
Definitely, because Spark is somewhere we are looking for innovation. I think this would be a great platform for us to collaborate on.
Yep. Yep. So Ben's project as well. So Ben is one of the few projects, a few PhDs where we do not have an industry partner, like someone actually who can evaluate our work. Sarvanya. So Sarvanya is working on requirements-driven unit test generation using large language models in Java. And there we are working on open source data sets, and Saranya comes from industry in India. So she has a lot of connections with industry in India, and she's evaluating her work with her connections in India.
So where are these LLMs deployed? Is it like ChatGPT or?
No, so these are also open source models that are running on our HPC.
So how do you train your LLMs? What kind of?
So we are fine tuning them based on the data.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So the models Saranya is developing, they're all fine tuned.
Okay.
Yeah. Fanyu is also another of my PhD students, and I'm going to talk about his work, like going into more detail about his work, where we are trying to use requirements and generate test artifacts. For example, test scenarios, test plans. So not test cases directly, it's a code, but test scenarios, test plans, and acceptance criteria.
And so they're generating and putting it inside a tool, or?
So eventually what they build are research prototypes, which are like not end user tools, but they still work, right? Like if you would like to test it on your own system, you can do that.
Yeah, I have a basic question, maybe a dumb question. So since we have a ChatGPT and many other AI tools, how does this framework is going to fit our?
So I'm at the end of the day, I'm a researcher, right? So our job is to also, as a part of our publishing our research, we need to figure out, we cannot just take any off-the-shelf solution. So we have to thoroughly evaluate what works in our context. So for most of these works, as you'll see is an example, we have to do our empirical evaluation on 3 or 4 different models. So we tried 3 or 4 different models, customize them, fine-tune them, and even do hyperparameter optimization for them to see what configuration works the best for this particular task. Vedant works for Atlassian. So he's an employee of Atlassian, works full-time for Atlassian, and he's doing a PhD with us on human-centric defect reporting and management. It's where all the JIRA reporting of defects. He's looking at specific kind of defects for people who are not defects for everyone. Like, for example, if you're trying to book an Uber with a child seat, it's not a defect, and you're not able to do that. That's not a defect for everyone, right? They probably 99% of your user base, that's not even a defect. But for 1% of people that actually need that, that might be a defect. So how do you report such defects, which are not really like functional defects in software? He's working on that with Atlassian.
The context space, basically.
Yeah. So Hira is working on requirements violation detection in machine learning systems using model-driven engineering. So that's more in the engineering domain, where they're using machine learning systems or building machine learning systems in different contexts. So we are looking at how we're building runtime detection of requirements violations, and that could be any kind of violation in the engineering domains. Okay, that's Romina. She is one of the external PhD students. She lives in Canada. So I work with her. So after I go back home at 10 p.m., I have a meeting with her. She's working on requirements, regulation traceability, so requirements to regulations traceability. For example, if you need to comply to HIPAA, which is a health-based regulation in North America, or GDPR, so what requirements or what regulations and the traceability of them so that it helps in compliance. That's right. Rai is working on LLM ops and ML ops quality assurance for responsible AI. He is embedded at Transurban. I don't know if you know Transurban. Transurban is a company in CBD here.
Yeah.
So he works there. So he works at least 1 day a week there while doing his PhD. So he's an industry PhD student with us. And he's looking at LLM ops and quality assurance of LLMs on different things, including RAG models. So I also do some research, not just with my PhD students, like, for example, model generation from natural language requirements using large language models, and also regulatory and standards compliance. So because I'm particularly very fond of this kind of research around regulatory compliance and so on, that's what I did with Luxembourg government as well. So like I said, I will quickly talk about, I know I'm very aware of time. I'm going to talk about one specific piece of research. It's called RAGTAG. That's a tool that we have developed, or that's an approach that we have developed for RAG-based test scenario generation. And that piece of work has been done in collaboration with Austria Post, not Australia Post, Austria Post in Vienna. So what are test scenarios? For those of you, I'm pretty sure most of you know that, but just for the sake of consistency, so test scenarios are specific instances of test cases that describe a sequence of actions. So for example, they would have an ID, a title, preconditions, and the steps that a user or automated testing you need to follow to get to a certain outcome, expected results. So it's very text-based artifact. So what is RAG? So for those of you who don't know much about RAG, maybe you do. But once again, so retrieval-augmented generation is the process of optimizing the output of a large language model. So large language model like a GPT model. I assume most of you know ChatGPT or GPT models. So it references an external knowledge base outside of its pre-trained data to get additional information, and also it helps to avoid hallucination. So that part is, for example, if you're prompting a model and getting a result, that's large language model. That's what you do with ChatGPT, right? All these additional bits are based on RAG. So that's the simplified version of it. It's slightly more complex than that. However, you have your domain documents, you can index them, you can have your document embeddings, and then you can query based on your prompt, you can query your knowledge base to get relevant data from your knowledge base and use that to generate responses from the large language model rather than it generating responses from the pre-trained data. So the context for Austria Post. The requirements are bilingual. The requirements are written in German and English. You'll see some examples. The same requirement is written, half of it is in German and half of it is in English. So that's very context specific, and that's why we are extending this piece of work now. We are now working with 3 different partners. One is Austria Post, one is in Melbourne, and the third one is in China, where the requirements are bilingual as well, but in Mandarin and English. So it's very time consuming to create and maintain the test scenarios. That's the motivation for them. And there's a lot of domain specific know-how needed to generate these test scenarios, because Austria Post, for instance, had a lot of systems and none of that, the information. So you might think like this is just a post company, right? But their IT team is more than 1,000 people. And it's like a decent size IT company, and all the systems and their know-how, none of it is available online. So if you go online and Google anything about their systems, you'll not find any information. So that's why you need RAG, because, and they don't want that information going for pre-training of models as well, and so on. And most of the information is unstructured, and that happens in different companies as well, right? So for bilingual requirements, it says Hakel alle soll verfügbar sein und ein Symbol für alle ist anzubieten, which is also a little bit in Austrian German. So that's not even Hochdeutsch or like High German. It's like a very, in some words are in Austrian German or a dialect of German. And we'll see later on, some part of that was automatically picked up by GPT models without us telling, look, this is the meaning of these specific words. So there is a test description written in German. There is test scenario. This is an example, which looks a little bit like this, which is part English, part German.
So you're able to do that after you have fine-tuned the model. I mean,
So we are not fine-tuning anything.
how would it know about how does the
So
model
that's where RAG comes in, right? Because we are giving it the domain knowledge in the form of so you remember this picture, right? So this domain documents, we're giving it domain documents.
But so you're not, so example, you're using something like ChatGPT. It will take the information, it will go back.
So we are not using ChatGPT, we are using GPT models, but in AWS controlled servers where it's guaranteed. So Austria Post has this contract with AWS, oh sorry, not Microsoft, that none of their data will be used for training of models.
But I can't use this on day number one. That's what I'm asking. Like
So-
suppose you're building something new. So
You
that
can.
will
So
be
if
done
you
on
have
day
your domain documentation, then yes, of course. Like if you're happy for it to be used, like for your data to go to GPT models, that's totally fine, right?
because we're talking about requirements here, right?
Yeah.
Requirements is that first thing.
Yeah.
So already we have documents with something we already worked on the domain.
Yeah. So the requirements exist exactly. So that's the assumption.
The initial requirements is the most painful one.
Yes.
Because
This piece of work helps you go from requirements to test scenarios. So automatically writing
Okay.
those. Yeah.
not the initial pain.
So initially there's different pieces of work, right?
Okay.
Okay, so this is the overall approach. So what needs to exist in this case was natural language requirements written in German and English. An example test scenario, it's called few-shot prompting. I don't know if you're aware of that. So zero-shot prompting is when you just tell GPT models what to do. Few-shot prompting is when you give some examples and tell it, look, here is an example in a different context, but this is the output format that I expect from you, and so on. And also because giving it some feel of what a test scenario should look like. And a brief description of the test scenario that you want to generate for the new one that you want to generate. So we give that and build a domain corpus. For Austria Post, we had some domain documentation, like a user manual that is used by deliverers, post deliverers. So we use that as domain documentation. And that's given to for the context retrieval part of RAG. And then we use the prompt generated by the analyst and all this information together to a large language model for it to generate test scenarios. To give you an idea of the complexity of prompts, roughly a prompt here is 2,400 tokens, words, for generating one test scenario.
That's it.
Yes, yeah. So for prompt generation, for example, here are some example requirements. The leaf post shall enable switching the Umsatzsteuer. So Umsatzsteuer is the VAT, value-added tax, from 20% to 18% for the Zollhaus-Schließgebiet towns. So Austria, for example, has certain regions or towns where you cannot reach within Austria. So you have to go to Germany. You take this road, which is part of it, that road is in Germany, and then you reach the other parts of Austria. So these parts that you cannot access directly through Austria have a special tax arrangement. And the tax is lower, so they have different parts in those systems that automatically calculate those taxes. And imagine doing that for around 50,000 post boxes, also like the parcels every day, and so on. And here's an example prompt template where we give the requirements, example test scenario description, example test scenarios, requirements, and so on. And here's the example test scenario that we use here for input. Eventually, you get the test scenarios that you wanted to generate, and so on.
What is the tag? Sorry.
Yeah.
There's a question from Abhishek, I guess. I think it's
Yep, Abhishek.
Yeah, my question is like the test cases that you show here, if I compare the test case from a pyramid model, like would you say this test as like end-to-end user journey or more unit test, integration test?
So
Because-
this is more towards checking certain features. So making sure, like for example, here it clearly tells you open the Leaf Post app in forward writing mode, so a particular mode. And in that particular mode of that app, you need to select this. So it gives you specific sequences, and it wants users to test like this would be your expected outcome. So do you get to the expected outcome or not if you follow all these steps?
But how do you like the companies that you gave example using this model? What is their frequency of deploying the code to production?
I don't have a good idea, but just to give you an idea of the test scenarios, so they are writing roughly 50 to 60 test scenarios every day for their 2 or 3 apps on which they're using it now.
Because I'm still like, I do appreciate the context and the research that you said, but the thing which I'm trying to understand is like now companies, when you started the session that it's like in the waterfall model requirement gathering is a big deal. Yes, it is. But now with the agile world, companies do spend a time on discovery, more usability, like understanding the problem with the users. They create a prototype and then they go with building a key feature, like a small feature.
Yep.
Where you have more granular level of requirement and they then translate into a story. So, and hence I'm trying to understand, like, because this training, this requirement, this test cases, like it sounds good on paper. I'm just trying to translate how would, like, if I go and say, like I'm having this session, if I go and say to my peers that yes, this is something interesting, the question would come that how it adds a value and how sooner we can translate into developing this product. Because if we are training the model, creating all these scenarios, then how much time are we spending on an end-to-end life cycle? That's what I'm keen to understand.
So in general, so our idea is as researchers, we want to see if we can automate the processes that they are doing manually. And they were doing it manually and spending quite a bit of effort. And now they are able to automate most part of it. It's not fully automated. It's any part of my research that I've been doing for so many years is not fully automated. It's you still need a human in the loop to be able to verify the outputs and so on. But like for example,
when you say
Melbourne company that I gave you, that we are now working with, they are also writing a lot of acceptance test criteria, right? And also these kind of test scenarios to test their systems. They are probably writing in total for a given system, they're writing only 100 test scenarios. But when they were writing these 100 test scenarios, they spent quite a bit of time at like one block of time in the entire project lifecycle. What they want to do now is they want to save even that much amount of block time. If we can automate most part of it, and if we can save, say, 50% of that block time for them. It's not like they're not saving time every week or so. In their context, it's only like once in a project lifecycle.
So Abhishek, I think just to answer a few points that you said. So eventually they will have benefits. You can't see the return on investment on day number 1. It's mostly the time that you're going to save, Second thing is the quality of things, because we human beings make a lot of mistakes, and this can also be used in, I think, even test data generation also. If you
Yeah.
can show it some sample data, we can. So eventually you can see the value. On the day number one, you might not have.
Okay,
Okay,
so I'll
yeah.
move to evaluation. So we
Sorry, I
evaluated
have one question. What is a tag there? You said RAGTAG, right? We understood tag.
test. So we just came with a cool name, RAGTAG. It's just
What are we
test.
tagging here? Like, is it
We're not tagging anything, We evaluated on 2 different projects. One project was for the special VAT calculation for special regions in Europe, and the second is pre-sorting of packages. And there were 75 requirements here in the first project, and 16 test scenarios, 41 requirements in the second one, and 15 test scenarios that we evaluated on. And we used one of them as an example, and I told you, right, we need one as an example. So we tried to evaluate it on 30 test scenarios. So this is very research oriented, but like we wanted to figure out what's the best configuration that gives the most accurate results, and do people actually find it useful in practice or not, which is generally the case for our research. So what we did was we evaluated 2 different models, GPT 3.5 and GPT 4.0. And we tried zero-shot prompting and few-shot prompting. And in RAG, you can select the number of chunks that you want to extract from your knowledge base. So that's the default token length is 512 tokens for that. So we were trying to figure out what combination works the best, and there are different metrics for that. In NLP domain, I won't go in too much details, but there are like Blue, Rouge, and Meteor. And then we figured out that GPT 3.5 with few shot prompting and only 1 chunk gives you a decent result for Meteor, which is much better for anything else. And for Rouge, it's on par with GPT 4.0 with 1 prompt. It's slightly worse for Blue, but Meteor is a more complex metric as compared to Blue, and it somehow subsumes Blue. So GPT 3.5 few shot and 1 chunk worked the best in that particular case.
See, but in those all things, when it comes to, I'm not a testing expert, but when it comes to testing things, they never see all this stuff.
Exactly.
How
So
would they know?
because that's why. So in certain cultures, for example, Australia, there is no culture of academics and industry working together. So there is no culture. Europe, you will not know any company that doesn't work with universities. So Europe, every small company or big company or mid-sized company will work with the researchers, and that's our job, to do research. It's the same with China, right? Like we work a lot with. There is a reason we work a lot with China and Europe, because there is this huge culture of working with universities, because universities have this agenda of doing research, and people focusing on building their own systems in the industry, which they can focus on because they cannot spend insane amount of time looking for new solutions or experimenting on 20 different solutions. Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're trying to achieve here, like at this particular meetup, where we're bringing university and industry people together.
Yeah.
Then, hope something comes out of it.
Yeah. So for the second one, we talked to 4 different experts: quality assurance manager, 1 product owner, and 2 test engineers. And we asked them for all the 30 test scenarios if they were relevant, if they covered the relevant concepts, correctness, sequence of steps, understandability, and feasibility. So highly practical and executable, and so on. So overall, 26 out of 30 were deemed very useful. 4 had major issues, and all the issues were related to the sequence of the steps. So in terms of overall results, they were very highly understandable, feasible, highly relevant, and coverage. There were some issues related to correctness, and that was the reason why there were issues related to correctness, that the sequence of steps was not exactly what they would have expected or they would have written manually. However, This was the qualitative feedback from the people. The tester said, imagine the time saved if you generated all test scenarios and just fixed the issues from this automated version. So it's not perfect, but it's much easier for an experienced person to look at it and say, okay, I just need to swap these 2 steps or do minor tweaks here and there to make it work in my case. The product owner said, especially for those 4 cases where it didn't work and it was like the output was pretty bad. The product owner said, if the test scenarios are weak or bad, this means that there were some issues in my original requirements. And it was very clear what were the issues in those requirements where we were not able to generate the test scenarios properly. And the test manager said, can we already use this for another project, Flächeabrechnung, this week? And they are, so Austria Post, so this is relatively recent piece of research. They are already using in 3 different projects now, this piece of research that we have done together. The key takeaways from this piece of work was LLMs versus RAG. So off-the-shelf vanilla LLMs didn't work in our case. So that's why the results with few shot were much better with 0 shot. And also we had tried not using RAG-only LLMs directly. Of course, there were data privacy concerns for Austria Post. In addition to that, LLMs didn't work directly by themselves. So we had to have a RAG model. Best off-the-shelf LLM might not be the best LLM for your task. For example, in our case, GPT 3.5 was relatively better than GPT 4.0. Because this study was done January this year, we didn't have 4.0, I guess. And even if the output is incorrect, which was the case for 4 out of 30 cases, it might still be useful for people to look, and that gives them an indication that there's something probably wrong in the input. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Yep.
Hello, everybody. Any questions? Feel free to ask, unmute yourself, or raise your hand. Or now Chetan will start asking questions. We have to answer. Okay, Natalie says that was great. Thanks, Natalie.
Chetan, hi, this is Ashwini here.
Ashwini, I think you have a question.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They're saying something.
Yeah. So I just want to ask that this whatever model you have designed, so same thing can be achieved with GPT as well, if I understand. But because you don't want to expose your documents to them and you don't want to put it in a public domain, so you don't use that and you make your own system to do this. Am I right?
Yes. So now with GPT, because you can upload 1 or 2 documents, I think, on the ChatGPT that's available, it's like RAG still, that it still extracts information from this external document. But with RAG models, you can have much larger data corpus.
Okay. Right. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Anybody? Yeah.
Right.
So we were talking much about RAG the other day. No? Okay, cool then.
Right, perfect. Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Do I? Hello. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for attending this session, and thank you so much, Dr. Chetan. That was a very good session, and there was a lot to learn. And as as you said, there's not much collaboration that happens between universities and industry. So STAG is providing that platform, and we want something really significant to happen. And the place where I work, like we value a lot of innovation here, and hopefully there'll be some collaboration that can happen between Dr. Chetan's work and other research that Monash University is doing, and we'll make the best of it to serve the society. Cool. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the evening. And we guys will continue chit-chatting here. Then take care. See you next time. Bye. Thank you. And feel free to subscribe on YouTube, add on LinkedIn, because we keep posting a lot of things. And feel free to review us as well. Today's talk, how was it? And that will be really helpful. Thank you. See you then. Bye-bye.